Before we get too far into project number 4, I just wanted to take a moment to talk a little bit about the differences between RWD and native apps, and that's responsive web design versus native applications. For project number 4, we're going to be moving into designing for a native app, and with that comes some different things to consider from a pattern perspective, even from a font and typography selection point of view. That's different from responsive web design. What we did in project number 1, where we looked at redesigning a local business's website, where we designed 3 screens for desktop and 3 screens for mobile, would be more along the lines of classic responsive web design. What we're going to be doing in project number 4 is focusing on a native application. Very similar, but different approaches and different things to consider. And I thought before we go too far into project number 4, it'd be good just to talk a little bit about the differences between those two and some things to be on the lookout for as you progress through the next several weeks of project number 4. So with that, maybe let's start with a little bit of a breakdown of what exactly is responsive web design. You've probably heard that term before. As I looked back at some of the discussion posts from project number 2 and your final submission, I think some of y'all mentioned responsive web design in some of your lessons learned and things like that. And I just wanted to clarify a little bit about what we mean in responsive web design. And with project number 2, we focused really just on the desktop view of what your apartment finder website or apartment complex website would look like. Responsive web design essentially is taking into consideration multiple device types, multiple screen sizes from the largest to the smallest, and you as the designer making conscious decisions from at each breakpoint as to what type of content to include, not to include, and to keep in mind how your design is going to scale at those different device widths. And so, typically your mobile or phone designs, the screen widths are going to be anywhere between 767 pixels wide and below. Now, there are a lot of different device types that fall within that. Just think about the different types of phones that are out there, from the Apple, iPhone 6 to now the 12. The different types of Google Pixel phones or Samsung phones. So there are different device types that a plethora of devices that fall within that category, and the same with each of these. Really, there are a variety of different tablets that are offered or that are on the market today at different screen sizes, and again, desktop and laptop views as well. And so that's really one of the big reasons why you'd want to take some time at the very beginning of a project to understand audience type, what type of devices that they're using or that they might be using your product on. If there's any analytics that are out there that you're maybe designing or referencing that could help you make a decision as to what breakpoints or what screen sizes to consider. That way you're not having to design for every possible device type. That might be nearly impossible, but that you're making conscious decisions about your design for different types of devices or screen sizes that your site is going to be consumed on. And so, in this middle area, you have tablets, and again, there are a variety of different devices that fall within that. Typically, they fall within that 1023 to 768 pixel width size. And now there are tablets that are out there now that are a little bit larger than this, and they're kind of moving into probably consuming some of the different design considerations for what were classically reserved for desktop and laptop views at that 1024 pixel wide and up. And I thought this graphic just did a really easy, basic job of kind of breaking this down and showing what we mean when we're talking about responsive design. You can see in this design, how this layout responds. Again, responsive web design. This may be hero or feature section here. Just keep an eye as to how this kind of adapts from different screen sizes. Here on tablet, things get a little bit smaller. The gaps between the gutters here between maybe the photo and the text get smaller. Maybe on portrait mode, it stacks on top of each other, and that's a similar use case for mobile there. So let's check out what that looks like in the real world, maybe on Shopify. And so if you start here on desktop here, we'll go from right to left. We start with kind of what y'all did in project number 2, where you focused on building a solid navigation for your apartment complex website. And so here you've got the Shopify logo, it's classic navigation here on the left-hand side, a call to action to get started here on the left. Maybe you're entering your email, again, getting started this promo here. Here in the hero image, we've got maybe the full context of, it looks like her name is Sophia here. The full context of her and her environment on her laptop, taking notes. We can kind of see, what accent pieces she has around her. And we kind of get the scene here. We also, as we scroll down, we get a little bit more context about Shopify, an illustration here that's hiding behind my video. It's a larger illustration. As we go down to tablet, things change a little bit. We have just the Shopify logo, the hamburger menu, as it's classically called. There's a little less real estate left to right, a little less breathing room here for this promo to sign up and get started. And again, this image becomes smaller and it scales here. And we keep the illustration down here in this kind of promo area about Shopify, your brand, your way, but it's much smaller than what we had on desktop. And by the time we get to mobile, as a designer, you're making conscious decisions, like I said, as to what type of content you might eliminate or truncate depending on how your design scales. And so even here on the photo, we've really just zoomed in just to Sophia. We don't have much context around her in her the landscape of this, of what kind of environment she's in. But we do know that she's kind of here on her laptop taking notes. So she's remained a focal point in that image as we've scaled down from desktop to mobile, and then back up. We kind of widen that view back up to desktop. We've nixed the illustration here. It's a conscious design decision. Oftentimes you want to make your mobile site as streamlined as possible, as actionable as possible. And so while there might be a use of a hero image like this, stacking illustrations and maybe more visual content like that might be a conscious decision for you as the designer to remove and just get your audience the information, the actions they need quicker here on the mobile device. Let's go over to the Wired example. So, online magazine, lots of content from Wired. On desktop, you can see we've got a wide navigation that spans the width, left to right of this browser. I've got the search capabilities and subscribe, and I've got kind of the waffle, which may be the cousin to the hamburger menu. This got 9 boxes here in the top left. And you can see they're using a container, a 12-column container, it looks like. And their articles are kept in these cards, and they stack and or organized in a unique way here on desktop. You have that real estate to do that. And we talked a little bit in project number 2 as to why it's important for that container width, for you to keep that kind of container size. As this begins to scale, you can imagine if they didn't have that container, maybe how out of control this would get, or how they would lose control of their content. As you get into tablet, things become a little bit more, they become more stacked for top stories, which is a kind of a new ad. We didn't really see that here on desktop. We've got less, breathing room left to right of these navigation links. We still have the same top nav here with the waffle menu, subscribe, and the search, but our stories begin to stack. And that's a noticeable difference between desktop and tablet there, and one that will continue as you go over to the mobile device and phone. Although you can see we've lost the search icon here on the phone size, mobile size. It's probably hiding within the waffle menu here as well. So let me actually show you a quick tip or trick inside of Google Chrome where you can actually do this for yourself and kind of see how, or play with one of your favorite sites and see how it responds to different screen sizes. It's a really cool add-on inside of Google Chrome. So if you jump into Chrome, I've actually got Wired pulled up here. I'm just going to right click on it and go to Inspect. Now, Inspect is probably primarily a developer's best friend in here as it breaks down the different code for you and highlights where that's at on the page, and maybe what type of CSS they're using and things like that. And again, we didn't get into a lot of code here in the introductory class for Intro to IXD. Perhaps something we'll talk about maybe in a more advanced view, but important for y'all to understand, interaction design, UI, UX design, and the different deliverables along the way that you, as somebody who's coming out of a graphic and interaction design program, it'd be important to have And so maybe we'll address the coding side of all this here in a different class at a different time. But one of the cool features of Google Chrome is the ability to be able to see this screen here in inspect mode at different sizes. You see responsive here. If this doesn't come up for you, if you're trying this at home, you can see toggle device toolbar here. I've got it on, so it's highlighted there. And this kind of just showcases for me and just pops up this little view here. So you can do this a variety of different ways. Here we can see maybe a 4K rendering, a 4K view of it. You can see really lightly these different notches I have here. This is kind of a large laptop view here at 1024 pixels wide. I can get smaller and see what this looks like on a large mobile device or a small mobile device. You can see maybe there's a couple challenges here with this design as it scales. I also see this little kind of control item here, this control action, where I can actually scale this out. And you can see how this design changes as I scale, as I change my device width from a responsive perspective. Here I'm at 1652. Let me just type in 1366, which was a size that we were using on prior projects. And here you can see, this is a left-right swipe or a carousel here on a desktop view. As I change maybe to more of a tablet view, you can see how that responds and how that changes. Now it's kind of all those articles are exposed, and it's a left-right kind of swipe slider. And so that's a conscious decision made by the designers, developers of the Wired website to expose all those articles and not have them hidden behind those clicks like they were on desktop. And I think a wise one for taking advantage of some of the features on a tablet view where you might be more inclined to swipe left and right. Let me kind of size this down to a mobile view. We're actually going to be working in a 375 pixel wide view for an iPhone 10 for project number 4. So you can see how this then changes for an iPhone 10 size. And so if you're interested in responsive design, want to dive a little bit more into it, this is a fun tool to play with. Again, I just right clicked on Google Chrome and went into inspect mode there in the options. And you can actually drag this around and see how a site would respond, maybe how the photography changes and how it's handled, how different aspects of the design are handled as the site changes and shifts in size there along the way. So let's jump back into our presentation here, and I've got just a few more slides, talk a little bit about then native application design. So native app design, responsive design can actually look an awful lot like a native app. Here I've got the example of Instagram, responsive web versus native app. So maybe just take a second and take a look at these different images of the Adidas page on Instagram. It's tough to tell maybe the difference between what is a responsive view versus what is the native application view. And I'll save you the suspense. And on the left-hand side, we have the responsive mobile site. And on the right-hand side, we have the native mobile app. They look very similar. And so while there are different approaches to the design of responsive web versus native applications, there are some similarities, and there are some things that you can do to make those experiences very similar between the two different platforms. And so let me actually jump into and highlight some of the differences that I saw, just kind of looking at the differences between these responsive web screenshot versus the native application screenshot. So some things that you kind of can point out here, that the top navigation is a little different. Here on the mobile, the native mobile app, this is really accounting for that notch inside of iOS products now. This was taken on an iPhone 10. And so the notch would appear here. It's also got some of the native features of an iPhone or of a mobile phone. You've got the time here, and you've got your battery life, your cell service, and things like that. So your navigation is just slightly different. Also, too, you can see here between the two on the mobile app, I've got notifications and kind of the overflow. I think I can maybe snooze Adidas or block them through this, but that's kind of hidden perhaps behind this overflow menu here. I don't have the notifications within the responsive mobile site also. From a font perspective, things are a little bit different as well. This is a much larger font here inside of the bio. It's a little smaller here on the native mobile app, and Perhaps that's because the native mobile app takes advantage of some of the native accessibility controls on a Android device or an iPhone or an iOS device, where the user themselves can change the font sizes based on their accessibility settings and their site settings. And so perhaps this is a little bit smaller because I have my settings on my iOS device for a little bit smaller readability on my typefaces. Again, here in my kind of how I want to consume or view Adidas's content, that changes here. I have the grid versus kind of the swipe mode, up and down swipe mode here on available, where I don't really have that here on my native application. Some little things that are different you may have noticed. The grid is a little wider here on the responsive mobile site, where it's a little thinner. It's a little bit more immersive of an experience on the native mobile application. And then my bottom nav bar is slightly different too. You can see the home icons are a little bit different. The icons in general, search, Reels is available here on my native app. It's not available. It's the plus in the middle. And some of this might be just the native application updating and being more up to date than the responsive web version of the site might be. And so there might be some development considerations, some design considerations that are happening through this. But I just wanted to point out that just because these are two different types of design or two different approaches to design on different device types, they can look very similar. And I think the Instagram version of responsive web design versus native app is a really good example of that. Let me jump into some of the mobile application and kind of discuss a little bit about native mobile apps as we go into project number 4. And so essentially native apps are designed and developed to run specifically on mobile operating systems. And so while from a responsive web perspective, they can run on a variety of systems, variety of devices and screen types, and can be opened on a mobile device in a browser, native applications are designed to run on a specific type of iOS or a specific type of Android device or other devices out there, specifically to mobile or tablet. There's also some application design. If you think about Apple's calendar view, that's available also on desktop, would be an application for desktop, for tablet, and for mobile. But for our purposes, we're really specifically focusing on mobile native application design. And I've just taken some screenshots here of some of the different categories that y'all have selected for this fourth and final project. And, I don't think anybody selected the ride sharing app, so I've left that one out. But from an entertainment app perspective, you can see in finance and travel, while there are similarities in all of these, the bottom navigation bar is a similar feature in all of these. Maybe a top navigation would at least be consistent in the entertainment and the finance app. Could also be consistent in a travel app. There are travel apps that have hamburger menu or kind of the different categories broken down here. But I thought it'd be important just to highlight maybe some of the differences that I've traditionally seen in these different types of app genres. So on entertainment apps, you're really all about the photography, the video, that immersive experience. And I think Netflix does a good job of this. Here I've got just a screenshot of my daughter's Netflix profile. And so you can see they're highlighting the content. It's all about the content. It's all about the visuals. It's all about different categories and being able to quickly navigate to different categories that are available or different types of content that would be available in those categories based off what you have available in your app. And so when I think about entertainment apps, I think about an immersive experience of photography, of video, and just a beautiful immersive experience based on the content that I'll be consuming. When I think about finance apps, I really think about different features that might be available. And what I love about the NerdWallet example is I've seen this app change and develop over time to where maybe they're taking into consideration user feedback or interviews that kind of bring to light the different features that users would want to see. And so this kind of feature area has changed. Now it includes credit score and net worth and cash flow. I can optimize it. That's a locked feature for me right now. But if you're using a finance app, and I think a few of you are, think really about those different features that are going to be available within your product, within your finance app. And maybe it's worth highlighting those kind of in a dashboard view on your homepage, on your dashboard. And then finally, from a travel app perspective, this is an example of Airbnb. I really think of search being the forefront. Where do you want to go? And Airbnb does a great job of that. And they've also called out COVID considerations again, and this time something to consider. Or it doesn't have to be just COVID, or it could be, if there's ever travel emergencies and things like that, that's based on your location. They're highlighting those important things that would be important to know as you make your decisions about travel. And so, like an entertainment app, when I think about travel, I think about beautiful photography, that immersive experience. It really draws me to want to be in that location. And so Airbnb does a good job of that. You can imagine yourself staying at this beautiful cabin in the woods or house in the woods there. And again, it's kind of hidden behind my video here, but typically travel apps would allow the user to search quickly, but then also be able to explore or give suggestions nearby. And so the Airbnb app does that. When you think about mobile native app design, there are really two major platforms and design systems for native products or native designed applications. And that's Apple's HIG guidelines, the human interface guidelines. We're going to break that down a little bit later on, or talk a little bit about these platforms more in depth. And Google's material design. If you're watching this video as a part of the mood boards project here for project number 4, you're a step ahead of the game a little bit. If you have the time, jump on over to the links that are provided in this module and download the kits that are available for Adobe XD and experiment. One of the cool things about having these design systems and the native design languages for Apple and for Android or Google devices is that they often make those kits, those design systems, available to the public. And so you can use some of the components out of the box, change the colors, maybe even change the fonts if you want to match your product's look and feel. And so if you have the time, I'd encourage you to check those out. They're available in the links that I'll provide in this module below. And with that, there are also typefaces that are used primarily when you're dealing with native applications. Now, you're going to make the decision that's best for your product. I would just say that typically mobile applications stay in the sans serif range in really only one font selection. And your typical Apple design or Apple iOS design is going to use San Francisco. It's the native font out of the box for iOS products. Or if you're designing for an Android device or leveraging Google Material Design, Roboto is the typeface of choice for Google Material. Both of those are beautiful sans serif fonts. And typically on mobile devices, you'd want to stick with one sans serif font that gives you some different font weights, some options there. And it's a much more narrow type scale than what we did for responsive web design. And so with that, I just want to say good luck on project number 4. I'm going to start peppering in some helpful articles or videos about mobile app design throughout the next several weeks. Again, I know we're going to be starting with mood boards and IA mapping and user flows, moving into wireframes, and finally prototyping before the final is due. But I just want to pepper in some helpful articles and content throughout these next several weeks to help kind of get you pointed in the right direction for mobile app design. Hopefully this overview was helpful. Again, based off some of the content and the feedback that I saw from project number 2, just wanted to spend a little bit of time breaking down the differences between responsive web design, which can really scale from a variety of different font or types, device sizes and widths, from a large desktop view to a small mobile device, versus native app designs, which are specifically designed to run on operating systems like iOS or like Google or Android phones. And are very specific, different use cases than responsive web. And so good luck as you go into project number 4. I'm excited for y'all to have a really great example at the end of this of a native app design that's been driven by user feedback and user input at the very beginning of this project. And I'll be excited to see ultimately what y'all do for your different app genres and categories. So hopefully this is helpful, and I'll chat with y'all later. Thanks.